Hey everybody, this is Eve Eden. I am a design director with 15 years experience, and this is UX Murder Mystery.
Hey, and I'm Brian Crowley. I'm the co-host of this podcast, and I'm a designer, UX designer, and design lead with 20 years of experience.
Awesome. And we have a treat for you today. We have a special guest, Aiman Akhtar, and he is the founder and CEO of Fungisaurs. He is a innovative producer, 3D artist. He specializes in stylistic character development for animation and games and toys. He's worked in visual effects, games, text, stop motion animations. His most recent leadership role was the digital design director at Nickelodeon Studios. So welcome, Aiman. Glad to
Thanks so
have
much
you.
for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
All right, so Brian, what are we going to talk about today on UX Murder Mystery?
Well, we're super excited to have Eamon because we want to talk about Skylanders, and we want to talk about the rise and fall of Skylanders. And I'll preface this with a little bit of what triggered this is I have Masters of the Universe behind me, and I was wondering what toys had ever experienced the blip that Masters of the Universe had, where Masters of the Universe in the United States spiked up, made like $4 billion or something in the first couple of years, and then it like coasted out. And there's a lot of conversations around why. If you've ever seen the show Shark Tank, you can read up on Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. There's a lot of people that point in his direction as to like why Mattel took a dip in the 90s. You can read those articles. But Skylanders has a similar story in that 10 years ago, Skylanders was everywhere. You could not go anywhere without seeing them everywhere. So Eamon, I would love for you to, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again for having me. And what a fun topic to talk about. Skylanders definitely in the 2010s really took off and charge with what we call phygital entertainment because it's physical to digital entertainment. Their whole brand, not necessarily created, but really popularized the toys to life genre. And like you said, they were everywhere. Like they scaled very and they had multiple studios working for them to create these toys as well as the games, and they made a lot of toys. So whereas most toy companies, like I have an indie toy brand, but most toy companies, like even the large scale ones like Mattel and like Hasbro and all, have like little stuff here and there, and they take up, like the toy aisle with little blips here and there. Skylanders had like a section, like they had like a whole big aisle to themselves almost for many years. So quite impactful, quite successful in and of its time. But then, like you said, there was a rise and a fall. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be here to talk about it because they really started a trend in the Toys to Life movement and faded away just as quickly. So we have a lot to talk about.
So one question I have that I'd be curious to know from you is so there's a little bit of a debate, I guess, around like, was the inception, was this like a flaw from the start, or was this a flaw along the way? Like, how do you see that structure, and how do you see that hashing out, kind of?
Great question. So I have expertise in this from a few different angles because as an indie toy maker and digital artist that worked on games, I've had both sides of this story. I've also had some friends that worked on Skylanders and Disney, the competing brands. There is a flaw that was inherent from the beginning, which is the RFID chips. Like they don't last forever, and so it's not a sustainable forever solution. Inherent in it from the start. Whether that was the reason why it tanked or not, I don't believe so. I believe that if you Google what happened to Skylanders, if people like generally, well, they got, uh, the too, oversaturated in the market, or that, since Disney Infinity and Amiibo started doing their thing, they just weren't able to sustain. But I personally don't think that's the reason. I think the reason that they didn't do as well is they didn't provide a good user experience at the end of the day.
Interesting.
They just made too many games, which is just not a user-friendly thing to do.
And for people that don't know, can you tell people what an RFID chip is and where they would find it in their common everyday occurrences?
Oh, sure. So RFID chips are little like tiny tags. Air tags are similar. They're like a little more complicated RFID chip, but you find them anytime you can tap your phone and pick up some information from it. That's an RFID chip being able to do that for you. In the case of Skylanders and Disney Infinity and Amiibos, it was basically in the base of the toy itself. And so when you would put the toy on top of the reader, it would then read the code that was in there and then programmatically unlock and let you have access to that digital toy in the console game. And so that is what that technology was really, pushing. The collectibles themselves weren't particularly articulated or fun to play with. They were just toys that sat on a shelf. But the RFID chip allowed you to play with those characters digitally.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fact that like after, I think I read that it was like after 10,000 uses or something that the RFIDs die, which kind of explains for folks that like are not familiar with RFIDs. That's why you get a new credit card every couple of months, because like they're figuring like when the RFID chip in your card probably has died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just even in time, like just like anything else, it'll fade. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Aiman, you mentioned something. So this is interesting, this consumer fatigue and cost. So when you're talking about the demand of like a new game and these expensive figurine sets that, became too much for consumers to, I guess, continue to purchase, right? From like a parental standpoint, children, was that a issue with declining sales despite like their new gimmicks?
Absolutely. So, for those not familiar with Skylanders, it had a quite high buy-in price because you had like a set of 3 characters. You had to get the portal. The game itself was like $60, and so you're talking over $100 easily just to get started. And then you need to keep shelling out more if you want more characters, which is all good point. But a user-friendly experience for a consumer and a gamer would have been cool. This is a wonderful thing. I've got this. Now maybe for my birthday, I'll get some more, or when I get my allowance, I'll get some more. And next year for Christmas, I'll get some more. But basically by next year, Christmas rolled around, they had a brand new game. They had brand new characters. They had brand new, like a portal if you wanted to expand on like, things like, and you kind of had to keep upping it. And they did that like 6 years in a row. I think there was like 5 or 6 games. So yes, there were really fun gimmicks like Skylanders Trappers that trap the villains. And then they had like, like mix and match kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's not a consumer friendly thing to make your, gamers, your buyers, your supporters have to spend so much. And so that's kind of, I think, what led to their downfall was this, I think, corporate executive driven mentality of, no, we've got to scale, but we can't scale like this and, have high profits. We want to shoot it up. So that exponential profits mantra is, I think, what drove the user experience into the ground.
Yeah.
And there was also like the barrier of you had to have the video game system as well, like
Sure.
as part of the cost, right? Like, so like you couldn't, it wasn't a thing where like, if you think of like kids on a playground or whatever, or talking about Skylanders or wanting to collect or doing that type of thing, they would have to have a game system, which is expensive, and then you're adding that on top. And then 6 years typically is like around the times that generations of consoles also change
Sure.
as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So generations of consoles is another thing. I mean, to a degree, like again, it is a successful brand. Like if we're not measuring success by longevity or forever and just impact, like they had a huge impact. I think
Sure.
the key thing to remember is they had a big rise, and like they were everywhere. They sold a lot of toys, but then because they were just cranking them out, a lot of them ended in discount bins. So some of the fall is like some of those Skylander toys were like $1, for discount bins, like, and you can still find them around. They're, vinyl
Oh,
plastic,
I'm sure.
they're around, and I don't think the RFID chip does anything. They don't really support the games anymore.
Right.
But as collectors, they could certainly be like a fun collector's item as a set. But the vast majority of them, like like most plastic toys, end up in like the junk. And so having created a lot of physical product towards like sales, and then not meeting their sales goals and expectations, and then ultimately deciding that Activision in particular, they're like, okay, well, we'd rather invest in like Spyro and Crash and other IPs that aren't physical properties, because the cost of making stuff is so high, that they're not recouping the profits the way they want. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to also like explore and kind of push on too is obviously, the toys to life genre is one genre in all of the, aspects of gaming and, just playing with toys. So with that, I think, the rise and fall of Skylander, do you feel like someone is doing really well in this current market, or do you feel like there's a shift or a pivot happening?
That's a great question. So right now, I think that there is a big gaping hole in the Toys to Life genre, and the new generation's clamoring for it. New technology has arisen that can make that experience a lot more enjoyable. To which end, like I created my own startup and tried to raise funds to scale my own Toys to Life brand. So I have this indie toy company. It's called Fungisaurs. Those dinosaur mushroom characters is the IP. And they're really cute little, like, I don't know if you can see very well in this.
Oh yeah.
They're little mushroom dinosaur critters, And so these are all collectible toys, and like, like Skylanders and Disney Infinity, they sit on a shelf. But we also like to, say, well, instead of putting one on a little shelf, maybe put it in a planter pot. Remember to go water it and make it an eco character thing. Just because of generally what mushrooms do for our ecosystem, I thought there's a lot of potential for storytelling there. And so also working on an animated story and stuff. But what really was the impetus for me was like seeing in 2018 Skylanders just dive, as well as Disney Infinity and Amiibos. This is all pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
They were gone, and these were, targeted decisions by executives, again, wanting an exponential profit margin and scaling, which is very hard to do in physical media in general. But also, they were relying on this older wave of technology, consoles and RFID chip, to digitize something rather than a one-to-one experience. So when I'm building my startup, I'm trying to use something that's ubiquitous to everybody, their phone, and basically pointing the phone at the toy in augmented reality, and then being able to interact with it right away. You can feed it, you can water it, you can like build a little home for it, and that kind of thing I think is a lot more appealing. And honestly, that's also a little bit out of date now, because generation, like we're gonna have like really good AR glasses, which means your toys, you can just look at them and they'll start, reading algorithmically and coming alive. And this isn't even factoring in AI. This is just basic machine learning, not like complex
Right.
object identification based on like the shape. It's called a model target that we can kind of program in 3D, and then the software knows to scan, based on this shape, and then the colors. And so it can identify what it's looking at, bring it to life, and then it does, and you can look at a thing and then interact with it. And I think so the Toys to Life genre definitely has legs, and there is a demand for it. Like for me, I've sold 13,000 toys, which is an indie company, like was a lot.
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
we made 16,000. Like I'm sure I did a lot of giveaways and marketing stuff, but I'm down to like 1,000 toys left. So I'm not even selling them online. Like I'm trying to scale and get funds so that I can focus on the animated series and get people to know my IP before I do my next push into physical media. Right now is not a good time for toys with all the Trump tariffs. So focusing on immersive experiences, focusing on games. But I think the toys to life genre and digital entertainment has a lot of legs. If you look at the rise of like physical experiences like escape rooms, the rise of like trick art museums, and like just kind of like spaces where you can go and start, like even like if you look at art like the Van Gogh immersive exhibit and stuff, people really like going and experiencing physical things. And especially as AI slop kind of dominates the online social media scape, people want more physical real interactions. So Toys to Life has a lot of potential, and there's a clamoring for it. However, a lot of these companies, like for example Disney Infinity, when they pulled out, I have a lot of friends that lost their job working in Utah on these awesome figurines, and they were really the best of the best in stylized character development and sculpting. Yeah, exactly. I think that might have been
Well, Brian, what
is that? Describe it if somebody's on
It's
audio.
It's a right. That's a good point. This is the Disney Infinity Han Solo. That's in a very stylized, cartoony style that I thought was just awesome. And Eamon, you know the person that sculpted.
I think so. I think that was either sculpted by my friend Matt Thorpe or Shane Olson. Like it's a very signature style of the way they pinch and create sharp like facets as they create the design. It's a really unique and really beautiful design. And there was a demand for those because of the Disney IPs. People wanted to collect those even more than they wanted to collect Skylanders and just have whole sets of them, right? So they rode the kind of whole Funko Pop kind of craze of like having a specific style in which all of these different IPs could be presented, like the Dunnies, and there were so many like a period, And but Disney Infinity was definitely leading the charge. Even more so than Skylanders, because they have their IPs to lean on, and people love the Pixar movies, and you can get the in and out characters and all sorts of things like that. But that was another, corporate decision that, hey, we're not making the exponential profits that we want, and so we'd rather not make physical media and not make games. Instead, we'll just make money by licensing our IPs to other game studios that want to make the games. And that way we'll cut our costs and then still be making money. So I don't think it was a decline in the Toys to Life genre that led to these things being canceled. I think it was not meeting the exponential profits and scaling goals of venture capitalists that is inherently, we live in a limited resource world. And so exponential profits are not possible in real life. They're possible in speculation markets like AI. Right now, there's a big bubble growing, right? It's not really possible in physical media. Like there's only so much space in your walls that you can fill with toys. Like, you know what I mean, Brian?
I do. I do.
What is he talking about? What is he pointing at?
I
If
completely
you guys
understand.
are on audio, what Aiman is pointing at is Brian's walls filled with figurines. I mean, he has shelves and shelves, not only, it's like levels of them.
It's worse. It's worse than you can even visually see here. Trust me.
I remember when visiting.
I had a whole wall as well, but I had to scale it down to just 2 display cabinets that are over there. But yeah, I mean, moving is like a logistical thing. But even if you have like all the space in the world, like there's a limit to an individual consumer how much physical stuff they can get. Even if they're a mega fan, even if they're a whale, is what it's called in gaming, and they want everything, and they want to be like a full completionist of it all collector. You can't possibly like have it all and enjoy it all, and so this drive towards okay, we got to scale like this, I think is the reason why Skylanders and a lot of the digital entertainment phase fizzled out in the 2018 2019 times. So there is a big space that's open for it. There's a new generation that's clamoring for it. There's new technology that's available for it. It's just about getting it to market and first and getting it there to them.
Right.
You know what? One thing I wonder is because you mentioned COVID, and part of me was starting to wonder, maybe was Skylanders like a decade too soon? Like I could imagine if Skylanders had launched during COVID, because I remember during COVID, Animal Crossing
Animal
taking
Crossing
off
is a big
and
one.
playing like Animal Crossing with friends because of the fact like everybody was like stuck at home and like
Yep.
needed new stuff to like be able to like figure out like what to do. And so I'm curious if maybe sometimes that's an interesting thing that sometimes happens where a technology comes out and it's just too early or it's just happened too soon. So
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a case to be made for that, right? Like in my perspective, I think Skylanders would still be around today in its level of popularity and
Yeah.
still be making money hand over foot for its investors if they had just had a more reasonable pace and understanding that people want games every 2 to 3 years. They don't want a game every year. People want new toys, yes, but maybe like 10 new toys a year, maybe 20, not 120,
yeah.
And I think that kind of greed and ethos is why people were just turned off by it. Because I think, like again, very big success for like 6, 7 years, I threw a 6, 7 in there somehow.
I was wondering if you were.
It was, I've been working with a lot of kids more recently, and
That's
it comes
right.
up.
It's suitable. Yep.
But though that was a good success for 7 years or so, it can be around for 70. And how do you do something like that? Like Masters of the Universe toys are still around. Like He-Man still keeps coming back
Came
around.
back, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Skylanders can as well. I think there is definitely potential for that. I think there's like going to be more physical to digital experiences that people want. The way they could have just stretched it out and still been relevant through the pandemic and still now, is if their 6th game was coming out now. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so it was just stretched out over a long period of time. And as they do that, of course, they can pull in new technologies and see what's happening culturally and change it to be, like one of the Skylanders game could have been much more, Animal Crossing-esque. They could have leaned on that and learned from that in order to do that. But if you don't, because games and movies are a very specific type of entertainment, and it requires large teams of people to make. All sorts of artists, all sorts of programmers, modeling, texturing, rigging, lighting, animation. Like much like play testing and quality control. The way game studios can really pull off something really cool is similarly with animation, is if you have those 2 to 4 year cycles. If you're demanding every year, we got to crank something out, that's when you get really bad user experience for gamers, and gamers are very quick to dump things. Like I was a big fighting gamer, so I was all about Street Fighters and Soul Calibers and Tekkens and like all of those genre of games. And I got really bummed by the Street Fighter games too, because they had paywalls for half the characters you needed to buy, and you needed to buy costumes, and then you needed to buy different levels, and then they would, by the time you got like that discount deal where they got everything out for you at a reasonable price, and you got that, oh look, a new game's coming around, and now the moves are completely different, and so now then you have to restart the paywall. And this user experience for games has led a whole generation to say, nah, I don't want to play these console games. I'm a casual gamer now. And now I play mobile games, and I play like things I can pop onto and pop out of. And I'm not going to spend a bunch of money because that sucks.
Well, and I also wonder if they could have done with going back to Skylanders for a second. I also wonder if they could have done the Fortnite model where they had been like, here's our one game, and then we're going to add new aesthetics.
Yeah.
And each time you have the aesthetic, if you want, like I think they just came out with Kim Kardashian as a character. You want to buy Kim, which is so weird, but that's a whole other story. But But if you want to buy Kim Kardashian and walk around as Kim Kardashian, great. You can buy that.
No, that's a
You
great
know.
point. Like Overwatch and Fortnite and some of these newer games have this model, and Fortnite is definitely one of the most successful games in the world and still is thriving because of that model. It's the same game. It's the same
Yeah.
game that it was day one when it came out. They've just
Yeah.
added more into it. So it's a lot more user friendly because you can still pop in and, life happens, especially if you're an adult gamer, which a lot of this stuff is geared to gamers that are, getting older. So if you look at a lot of the characters that Fortnite is releasing, some of them harken back to our childhood. So they're like completely irrelevant to, younger kids, but the adults will get it because the adults that are playing know that this game is there when they need a moment to escape life. They can pop in and they're like, oh, what's new? Oh, that's so fun, cool. And I can play for a little while and then you can pop back out. And so that comfort of knowing that your favorite game and your favorite characters and your favorite experience is there for you to pop into, that's a wonderful gaming user experience. But once this has become every year a new game thing, and you have to get the new things in order to stay relevant, in order to enjoy, and if you don't, too bad, we're going to stop supporting the stuff that's just 2 to 3 years old. That is inherently not a fun user experience.
One thing I was curious about, and Eve, I would love to know your perspective about this, is one of the dark UX patterns that Fortnite preyed upon was the creating the FOMO in children. And I think, and Eamon, I would love to hear from you as well, this idea of like creating scarcity, creating like limited editions and store exclusives, and then doing that whole thing, like the ethics around that. And Eve, I'd love to know from you as someone who is a parent, and I'm sure you experienced that with your children.
Yeah. Yeah, I can give you guys a story. So my kids didn't I asked them the other day too, like what was your experience like playing Skylander or with your friends? And they were pretty young. I think they were like maybe 7, 8 years old, maybe even younger. So but with Fortnite, my nephew was just exactly at that age. This is probably now, I'd say about, yeah, when he was about 13, it was middle school for him, maybe sixth grade. And what I noticed was this anxiousness with making sure that he had the right skin on. And I was like, what's going on? Why are you? And he was crying. And I just remember we were hanging out. It was probably, we were having dinner with my sister. My kids and her kids are pretty much around the same age. And I was like, why are you crying? Like, what's going on? Why are you crying? And he's like, oh, if I don't get the right skin, I'm going to get made fun of at school. Because I don't have I need this. I need to buy this thing. And my sister, told him, no, we're not buying it. We've done, there was like, I guess some things they did buy, but she kind of put her foot down and said, that's enough. And then, just his fear, I felt so bad for him. I mean, he was like literally like upset, but maybe it was also this kind of like addiction inducing dark pattern. So when we talk about dark patterns, so let's just take a step back. So dark UX patterns, dark user experience patterns actually happen to all of us every day. Generally where you see it is when it's invasive with advertising. Also kind of gimmicky when dialogue boxes show up as you're shopping or doing something and basically telling you, are you sure you don't want this? Like, do you and kind of guilting you into clicking like, yeah, I want the discount, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to give you my phone number so you can send me a text message for this discount. And so it's like, it's highly inappropriate, very manipulative. And I find, those things, those dark patterns, there's lists of them, and we should probably do an episode on dark UX patterns.
Well,
Brian,
My
Yeah.
favorite one is the one that you see on Instagram, which has now become like if you click on any ad on Instagram, which almost all of them are filled with dark patterns, but it's like
Yeah.
enter your email and spin this wheel for the discount, and it's
Sure.
all complete
That's what
garbage.
Timu is
But
built on, is just
yeah,
gambling.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
It does. It makes you feel gross. Like,
Yeah.
just like, what are you guys doing? Like, just stop. Also, like, I'm not going to go on your website anymore. Like and you see that with younger generations too. They're starting to like, I'm not going on social media. I don't
Yes,
need
and
this.
I mean the younger generation in general is a lot more aware of how things are being presented to them, and they look at things with a bit more critical eye. So going to toys, for example, there is like boys' toys and girls' toys, right? And so gender-wise, like, is quite a huge shift. Like this whole even going back to Barbies and Transformers, like pushing like blue for boys and pink for girls, and all of this it's all market, uh, I don't know, manufacturing consent for this is how it's gonna be, right?
Yep.
And Eve, this, like having like 4 daughters, like a lot of these games are not targeting like female consumers and gamers. Back in 2018, we were just starting to as an industry realize the power of female gamers, and how almost 90% of them were casual gamers because they just weren't being catered to in the console and PC game space. Almost everything was made for boys. Call of Duty and like all the different shooters and stuff like that. It really wasn't targeted towards femmes. And similarly with Skylanders, I think their first game, had something like 20% female characters to 80% boy characters. And, continuing down the line, I was just looking at this. They had a game called, Superchargers, 25% were female. Trap Team had like, 9 of the 36 monsters were female. Swap Force had not a single one. And Swap Force is an interesting thing because you could have had, like top of a character and a bottom of a character and swap that. So if you had genders, then you could have had trans characters, and they just didn't want to even touch that, and so they didn't even go there. And then like I think Giants was the last one in which they had like some of the most characters, or was it last one? Yeah, I think like the last one had like 32%, like about a third of the characters were like female, like gender wise oriented. But yeah, they just didn't think about like targeting, like the whole of the kids aisle. They were very boy focused.
Yeah.
It's so
Well, I remember I'll just add this too, is like in the 80s, growing up in the 80s, right? We had Atari. We had first version Nintendo. And I do feel like those games were neutral. So I was playing
Sure.
Duck Hunt, and Mario Brothers. Yeah, maybe I didn't think about like, oh, there's no princess, right? The princess and all of those characters kind of came later, maybe later, late mid 90s, maybe. But most of the games were pretty neutral, and I didn't feel like I was being left out. Now there's like really heavy focus on things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit more gendered in general. Like, I think there are more female characters, but they still like will target the gameplay towards boys, and so it's kind of not like the barrier to entry for female gamers is a bit higher, and the way online discourse and communication in these group chats and games goes, you get a lot of flack for being a female gamer.
boy.
So
Oh boy.
if you watch any Twitch streams of female gamers playing co-op games with other people, a lot of
Real bad.
13-year-old boys just kind of constantly calling them names and just being very toxic, masculine, aggressive still. And granted, it has improved a lot, but right now under Trump there's this whole resurgence of right-wing kind of toxic masculinity, for lack of a better word, and it definitely feeds in the game space.
And adult men also acting really poorly towards female gamers,
Sure.
which if you're that person, you are a loser. One thing I was thinking about is, I remember when I worked at a comic book company many years ago, I remember we were having a discussion around trying to, like, women reading comics or minorities reading comics, and a lot of people's opinions have shifted and changed since then. But there was a prevailing thought that became, oh well, minorities and women just don't read comics, and it was like, well, no, that is not true. What it was the people making the comics were majority in their at the time in their 40s and white and male. So all of everything that they were making was geared towards, young white
Yeah,
or
I mean,
white
they
male
write what they
audience.
know.
So it's like,
That makes
uh-huh,
sense. But the reason that minorities and women weren't reading comics is because they didn't see themselves reflected in
themselves
them.
in it.
They didn't see heroic characters that were black and brown and femme. Which
Yeah.
is kind of why, characters like Kamala Khan, like Miss Marvel, like made such an impact as they did, because suddenly there were people of color, comics. And there was a whole older generation that was of like white men that were basically like, I hate this. What's all this? Like where are my comics? Where are my Supermans and Batmans? Now what's this DEI kind of thing happening in comic books? And again, like this whole conversation about wokeness and like all of this is designed to make culture divisive, to divide us all so that the wealthy can keep taking as much as they possibly want. Because keep in mind, like all of our cultural differences aside, all of us have a lot more in common with each other, no matter what our political spectrum and ideologies and background. Every immigrant, every gender, every race have more in common with each other, and like no matter what our political background, than we do with like these 30 billionaires. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a really funny quote from this author, Dwayne McDuffie, who he was writing the Justice League, and he was getting stuff about basically he was getting guff about DEI at the time. And he's like, and people saying, "Oh, well, this is just a quota." And he's like, "These are fictional characters. These are not real jobs that are being
True, but also like they were giving people shit about X-Men, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. Was written about like how like bad racism was in the 80s. Like it is directly pulled from like people's stories, and so to now say that, oh, like you don't know the foundation of what a lot of these stories are built upon. Like Superman themselves and like the Punisher, those are cited as like certain types of archetypical like strong male like characters, but Superman was written by like someone Jewish who had like seen their family been persecuted. And so like this whole like idea that minorities and women like don't deserve representation, whether in comics or whether in games or animation and entertainment in general, is a very outdated one, and like it's markedly proven to be false. But now, for example, we're in another era where a lot of that those content in favor of more how should I put this, Top Gun-esque material. So it's cyclical. I mean, it always happens. This country in the U.S., since we're here, we're talking about games and entertainment and stuff catered to our market, which is a big market. There's a lot of consumers here. There's a lot of kids, and so there is this push towards right wing every like 4 to 8 years, and then left wing every 4 to 8 years. But you don't really have a
Thank
left.
I'm glad for that. At least we kind of like somehow we still stick together, and I think that's kind of my idealism, is that we realize like everybody wants to play with toys, right? Kids, everybody. It's like worldwide. You have like you see us like doing that like from even ancient times with like how a doll was made or whatever, how like people played together, and I just think those are definitely what I'd like to see, is just the revival of good stories.
Yeah, good stories and just good entertainment, good games, good toys. And what makes something good isn't who's represented in it, it's that it is a good experience. And what makes something a good experience in animation and games is specifically that it can cross cultural boundaries.
Right.
You can like, like I used to play with like Master of the Universe toys just like Brian did, but I was growing up in Pakistan, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so, granted, you played with them when they were brand new. They got to me like 10 years later when I started watching the series. But like the point is like, like animation and games can cross cultural boundaries,
Yeah.
cross language boundaries. Like all these borders are manufactured anyways. But the point is, entertainment is geared towards the user, and the user is a child, and a child isn't really interested in like I am this, I am that.
Nope.
No, a child is interested in that is cool. I want that. I want to play that.
And I want to play, and I want to be with my friends while doing it too. So yes, I think that's cool. So I just want to add some kind of scientific bit. So what I read, and I don't know, I'm not going to get the phrasing just right. I don't know if it's mitochondria or something in our bodies that they've found out that they figured out like how, and I'm going to not say this correctly, but that the cells that were hooked up to the game Pong actually learned how to play it without like a human attached. It was just these bunch of cells, and I just thought, I don't know why that just popped in my head as we're talking about gaming and, obviously like cross-cultural and cross every global. And so it's just like, yeah, I think we have an inherent nature in ourselves that wants to like be playful and, just kind of like have that connection there. So I think with that, to kind of like wrap this up, Brian, and I'm thinking, where do we kind of go from here, right? Like we are going into 2026, and probably when this is aired, we are in 2026. Do you see kind of like a vision of where we should go? Obviously, with like without the like issues of profit capitalism, and obviously always meeting these like business objectives. Would you see something like a light there that we might talk through for 2026?
Yeah, I mean, and Eamon, I would love to get your thoughts on this because since I know that since you have we're talking about Fungisaurs, and we'll definitely throw Fungisaurs into the show notes and make sure that like we have people link to that and go check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing that I thought of, and I kind of have there's been a push to get people and especially kids offline and get them all out of the internet spaces.
Right.
So I wonder, like, and so part of me wonders if, like, I think of, and again, this is my own bias of the physical toys that can like move and this is a puzzle, right? At the end of the day, this is a puzzle that I can turn from a robot into a toy. But I also wonder about like, man, it would have been so cool if the RFID was in this, so that way I'm able to do the back and forth between the online and offline experiences. And versus it being a statue, whereas I think some of the statue stuff that forces you to have to, if you're going to interact with it, you have to interact with it online. And I don't know about y'all, but I remember the play that I was most fond of as a kid was with cousins and friends in like the dirt in our backyards or in a sandbox, and like going and like sitting down and like maybe using popsicles or having to use your own creativity to make your forts and your vehicles and grab other parts from other toys or borrow a Barbie or whatever to like bring in and make stuff happen in your backyard.
That's a great point. I feel like play, as far as toys goes, will always be based on a couple of things, which is like imagination, and then the actual user experience of playing with that toy. What we in the toy business refer to is like the appeal of the toy and then the articulation of the toy. So if you look at Barbies, very appealing, not very articulated. Like the early Barbies couldn't bend their knees, you know?
Yeah.
And so not very playful. You can just kind of use your imagination to talk, but you know, compared to later on like Tomb Raider toys, like Barbies had no articulation, you know? And you know, to the far end, yes, the Transformers have a lot of articulation, and Spider-Man toys have a lot of articulation. So they have a lot of play, but they're not as appealing because they're mostly just made up of hinges, you know? And so they don't look as good. Like you can mask it in a bit in sculpture, but it doesn't look as good. It's just designed for heck fun, you know, movement and play. And I think we'll never lose those two aspects when it comes to, you know, vinyl plastic toys. Like those play aspects of is it appealing and is it articulated will always drive that physical experience. Now, when you're talking about the future and you're talking about a Skylander specifically and what they pioneered and like made the impact in the toys to life genre, now you're talking about the physical and the digital. So we're creating a phygital experience. And going into 2026, what we're going to see initially, like spaces that kids can go to that have access to AR glasses, because they're going to be a high price point. They're going to be like 500 to $1,000 to just start. So this is not something that kids are going to have, but they can put them on like an arcade or something, and then have that experience there with their friends where they can still see each other because it's mixed reality. It's not virtual reality where you're locked into the VR world. You're locked into the AR world. So you're seeing augmented reality of your physical things. Like if you're walking through a space right now, like say you go into a Disney theme park ride and there's all these animatronics, right?
Yeah.
If you have AR glasses, you could do the same thing, but they could just be sculptures. And the AR glasses will bring the sculptures to life. And so that is the phygital entertainment coming up. I think AR glasses are going to keep getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, presumably. And that will lead to more, you know, kids having them at home, and then different type of gameplay that can be done, you know, one-on-one in their environment and figuring out how to make that collaborative with their friends. So I'm excited for what's to come. And I think that don't count Skylanders out just yet. I feel like they could certainly make a comeback. There was a big push for like a mobile game to come back, but I think they might do better in like AR spaces. So fingers crossed, like, you know, they'll be back.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much, Brian. Anything else to add?
You know, the only other thing I was going to add is, and Aiman, I would love to hear your thoughts on what about robotics, Spheros, and like we're seeing RoboSen is making those little those transformers that are now transforming and interacting with people. Can you talk a little bit about where do you see robotics in this space?
That's a good question. I mean, there is a whole genre of STEM toys and like educational and learning toys, and it is popularized to kind of have kids learn and connect the circuits and, you know, create this stuff. There was a lot of engineering aspects of toys, you know, Legos, of course, but then there was I don't know, there's a few different brands that were really pioneering engineering in that toy space. I think robotics is always going to appeal to a specific you know, subgenre group, and it's not going to have mass appeal. And so when you talk about entertainment, you know, toys and animation and games, people really want these big hits to be 4-quadrant. They don't want it to be specific to science toys. They don't want it to be specific to sports toys. They want things that are mass market appeal, mass age appeal, across, you know, the board appeal. And so I don't think that robotics is going to be as accessible as just putting glasses on and being able to interact with something personally.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So where can people find you online if they are hearing this and they're interested in getting in touch with you?
Yeah.
Thanks for asking. So I'm a 3D artist based in LA. I'm doing my own producing for Fungisaurs, and you can follow at Fungisaurs on Instagram as well as fungisaurs.com. My own work, if you want to see the 3D kind of works from previous VFX, toys, stop motion to animation that I'm doing now, it's going to be on aimsite.com, AIMZSITE.com. And yeah, I'm excited to just keep seeing what happens in the entertainment sphere and how we make cool things cooler.
Thank you, Aiman. This was awesome.
Thanks, Simon.
Like, subscribe, and follow, or become our next victim of bad UX.
UX Murder Mystery is a joint production of EVE, User Experience Design Agency, and Crowley UX, where systems meet stories. It's hosted by Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Edited by Kelsey Smith. Intro animation and logo design by Brian J. Crowley. Music is by Nicholas Lee. You can follow us at UX Murder Mystery. You can email us at questions@uxmurdermystery.com. UX Murder Mystery is a copyright 2025, Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Thanks for listening.